The moment the siren started wailing, I knew this wasn't just another passive-aggressive HOA note slipped under my door. This was nuclear. It was a Friday afternoon, the kind of sunshine-drenched, perfect day you look forward to all week, and all I'd done was press the button on my garage remote. The door rolled up, revealing my pride and joy, a meticulously restored classic muscle car, and that's when the scream started. Not just a yell, but a high-pitched vibrating shriek that could curdle milk. "It's him! He's trying to move it! Officer, that vehicle is stolen property and he is a thief." I stepped out, hands raised, utterly bewildered, only to see Mrs. Penelope Finch, the HOA Board President, standing in my driveway, phone pressed to her ear, pointing at my car with a shaking, manicured finger. Before I could even ask what she was talking about, the police cruiser rounded the corner, lights flashing. The officer was looking at Penelope, then at me, then at the classic car sitting harmlessly in my own garage. The air was thick with tension, and I realized this ridiculous petty neighborhood war had just gone from annoying to criminal. My perfect Friday was about to become a viral HOA nightmare. The story begins in the meticulously manicured planned community of Cypress Landing. It's the kind of neighborhood where every lawn is a perfect 2-inch carpet of Bermuda grass. Every mailbox post is painted the approved shade of colonial sage. And absolutely nothing, from a rogue garden gnome to a slightly faded welcome mat, escapes notice. I, Elias Vance, had lived there for 3 years. I'm a software engineer by trade, and my personal passion is automotive restoration, specifically classic American muscle cars. This passion was the primary reason I bought my home in Cypress Landing. It came with a spacious 3-car garage. I was quiet, kept to myself, and always paid my dues on time. I saw the HOA fees as the price of admission for a safe, well-maintained environment. I was wrong. The price was my sanity, and the gatekeeper was Penelope Finch. Penelope wasn't just a neighbor. She was the self-appointed queen of Cypress Landing, and, more officially, the sitting HOA Board President. She ruled the community with the iron fist of a woman who believes property values are more important than human values. Penelope was a retired real estate broker, and she treated every square foot of the subdivision as her own personal, perpetually marketable listing. She had sharp, inspecting eyes, a perfectly coiffed silver bob, and a voice that could cut through steel wool. Her husband, Gary, was a silent, perpetually stressed man who usually followed 3 paces behind her, carrying her designer handbag like a reluctant squire. My first interaction with Penelope was benign, almost humorous. I received a certified letter stating that my new mailbox post, the one the community provided and installed, was 1/4 inch off-center and required immediate correction. To maintain the aesthetic uniformity of the streetscape, I fixed it. That was just the warm-up. My real issues began when I acquired Eleanor, a stunning 1968 Shelby GT500. She was rough, she needed work, but she was going to be magnificent. This car was my garage project, and I never worked on it outside. The problem was, she was bright, iconic, and unmistakable, and she needed to breathe. I would occasionally crack my garage door open for an hour or so in the afternoon to vent fumes from welding or painting and to let natural light in. This small, seemingly harmless act was the catalyst for the conflict. Penelope lived 3 houses down, but her line of sight was direct to my garage door. Within a week of owning Eleanor, I received my first notice of violation related to the garage. The violation read, "Failure to maintain garage door in a closed position while performing mechanical work. Article 4, Section 3 Bob. Garages shall not be used for industrial or commercial purposes, and all in-progress projects, mechanical work, and storage items must be completely concealed from view of the street or neighboring lots." The fine was $50. I closed the door immediately and paid the fine, feeling annoyed but accepting it as part of HOA life. However, Penelope had seen Eleanor, the stunning, predatory curves of the Shelby, the iconic paint color, and the car had clearly triggered something deep within her. It was too loud visually, too non-uniform, too exciting for her perfectly beige world. Over the next 6 months, the fines escalated. I was fined for the excessive volume of engine testing, even though I only started it up for 30 seconds inside a closed garage. I was fined for excessive foot traffic into the garage when my friend, a professional mechanic, came over once to advise on the engine block. The total fines quickly crossed the $1,000 threshold. I appealed. I went to the HOA meetings. I presented documentation showing the paint was non-toxic, the engine noise was within legal limits, and that my friend was a guest, not a commercial operator. Penelope simply smiled her tight, satisfied smile, looked down her nose, and recited the rulebook like gospel. "Mr. Vance, we appreciate your passion, but your project is disrupting the quiet enjoyment of the neighborhood. The fines stand." She had a majority of the board eating out of her hand, mostly elderly residents easily convinced that my '68 Shelby was single-handedly dragging down their property values. I learned the truth. The goal wasn't compliance. The goal was to get rid of the car or me. Penelope saw me, a younger resident with a dramatic, expensive hobby, as a challenge to her absolute authority. The community was an opera, and she had cast herself as the lead soprano, with everyone else reduced to background scenery. And my beautiful Eleanor? She was a spotlight that Penelope hadn't approved. I decided to stop fighting and simply adapt. I installed an industrial-strength ventilation system so I could work with the door closed. I only ran the engine late at night when she was presumably asleep. For months, Eleanor was invisible. Penelope's daily patrols became less frequent around my house. I thought I had won a small, quiet victory. But Penelope Finch doesn't take quiet victories. She waits, she watches, and she finds a new angle. And that new angle, which would culminate in the 911 call, was not about my garage or my noise. It was about her new car. A brand new, white, mass-produced luxury SUV that she had just purchased. An SUV that, as I was about to find out, looked just similar enough to my own perfectly legal, restored vehicle to launch the most outrageous, over-the-top, and ultimately disastrous confrontation of her HOA career. The tension was coiled tight, waiting for one tiny trigger. That trigger? A momentary lapse in my ventilation system, forcing me to open my garage door for a quick burst of fresh air. And Penelope was waiting. The fragile truce held for nearly a year. My work on Eleanor had progressed to the point where she was almost complete. The body was painted, the engine was tuned, and the final touches were being applied to the interior. During this time, the relationship between Penelope and me had entered a phase of tense, silent avoidance. She still patrolled, but since my garage door remained perpetually closed, she had turned her attention to other petty battles, citing a family 2 streets over for having a visible basketball hoop, and issuing a mandatory demand that all residents switch to a specific, costly brand of mulch for uniformity. It was during this quiet period that Penelope introduced her latest status symbol, a brand new, metallic white Mercedes-Benz GLE 450. It was a gleaming, expensive statement of her success and her perceived superiority. She made sure everyone saw it, often leaving it conspicuously parked in her driveway, a blatant, if temporary, violation of the no overnight street parking rule she zealously enforced on everyone else. I noticed the car, acknowledged the expense, and mentally filed it under Penelope's latest attempt to prove she's better than us. The critical detail, which I only registered subconsciously at first, was the paint color. While my Shelby was a deep, brilliant viper white with electric blue racing stripes, Penelope's new Mercedes was Dizino Diamond White Metallic. They were different classes of vehicles, different shades of white, and decades apart in style but from a quick glance. The sheer presence of a shiny, expensive white vehicle was now a shared factor on our block. The actual escalation began not with the car, but with a new, baffling rule change Penelope pushed through the board. She successfully mandated a curb appeal enhancement fee, an extra $50 monthly levy, earmarked, she claimed, for replacing outdated street lighting. In the same meeting, she slipped in an amendment to the garage rule that had been plaguing me. The new Article 4, Section 3.c stated, "All vehicles owned by residents must be verifiable by the board via annual DMV registration submission. If a vehicle is deemed by the board to be non-operational, non-standard, or a project car, It must remain fully screened from public view at all times. Any exposure of such a vehicle outside of routine ingress, use, egress is considered a public nuisance. This was a direct, calculated attack aimed squarely at Eleanor. It was a rule designed to give her unlimited fining power if I ever dared to let anyone see the completed car. She had effectively made my finished restoration a forbidden sight in my own garage. I pushed back legally. I consulted an attorney specializing in HOA law. The attorney, Mr. Davies, advised me that Penelope's power relied on my inaction. You need to expose her overreach. Elias, she's using the rules for personal, petty vendettas, not legitimate community interest. Mr. Davies sent a sternly worded letter to the board, citing the discriminatory nature of the project car definition and threatening a lawsuit for capricious enforcement. This infuriated Penelope. She didn't respond with legal maneuvers. She responded with a personal vendetta that was both juvenile and deeply disruptive. The next day, my trash cans, which were placed out 12 hours before the scheduled collection, a common, tolerated practice, were dragged directly into the middle of my driveway, blocking my car. A violation notice was clipped to the lid. Obstruction of common drive access. Then came the landscapers. The HOA contracted crew, under Penelope's supervision, began meticulously trimming my hedge, but they cut it 3 inches lower than every other hedge on the street, leaving a conspicuously bare strip of dirt in front of my porch. When I complained, Penelope showed up herself, clipboard in hand. Mr. Vance, your shrubbery was non-compliant. The new standard is 3 feet, 7 inches. She paused, lowering her sunglasses. Perhaps if you spent less time on that derelict automobile and more time on your curb appeal, these issues wouldn't arise. The final, decisive escalation happened on a Tuesday. Eleanor was truly finished. She was perfect. The ventilation system, which was supposed to keep the garage air-safe, had developed a small leak in the ducting, and the faint smell of fresh leather dye and lacquer thinner was becoming overpowering. I knew I needed 5 minutes max, just enough time to cycle the air. I checked the street. Penelope's Mercedes was gone. Gary's sedan was gone. The street was empty. 5 minutes. I hit the remote. The door lifted, the fresh air rushed in, and I stood in the doorway taking a deep, satisfying breath. It was glorious. I spent exactly 3 minutes and 50 seconds airing out the space, adjusting a fan, and enjoying the sight of the completed car under the afternoon light. Just as I hit the remote to close the door, I heard the faint, rapid clicking of heels on the asphalt. Penelope Finch had returned. She screeched to a halt in her new Mercedes exactly at the edge of my driveway. Her eyes didn't land on me. They fixed on the beautiful white-striped Shelby, which was now fully visible in the opening of the garage. For a split second, I saw a look of pure confusion, followed instantly by a look of maniacal conviction. Her jaw dropped and then her mouth snapped shut. Her eyes darted from my car to her new Mercedes, then back to my car, before landing on me with a terrifying mixture of shock and rage. It was in that moment that the truly absurd theory must have formed in her mind. A theory so divorced from reality that it could only be the product of an obsessive personality seeking the ultimate justification for their harassment. She must have seen the striking white car, registered its expense, and convinced herself that the only reason this defiant, non-compliant resident had this beautiful vehicle was that it was, somehow, hers or an identical twin, and I was holding it illegally. She threw her door open, didn't bother to park, and began walking toward my garage, reaching into her pocket for her phone. The stage was set, the tension was unbearable, and the biggest confrontation of the HOA's history was about to unfold. Penelope Finch didn't hesitate. Her face, usually a mask of controlled disapproval, was contorted into a furious scowl of righteous indignation. She had her phone out, the screen glowing, and she was already shouting before the garage door had fully returned to the down position. "You, stop right there, you criminal!" she bellowed, her voice carrying through the quiet street. "I see what you're doing. I know what that is. I had only managed to get the door halfway down. I stepped out, my patience evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard anger. Penelope, what in the world are you talking about? This is my car. It's been in this garage for a year. You fined me $1,000 over it." She ignored me, spinning away to speak directly into her phone. "Yes, hello, this is Penelope Finch. I need to report a felony in progress at 1420 Cypress Drive. I have clear visual evidence of a man attempting to conceal a stolen vehicle. Yes, I'm sure it's stolen. It's my car. He's trying to hide it in his garage." I felt a surge of disbelief so intense it was almost dizzying. "Your car? Penelope, are you serious? Look at it. This is a 1968 Shelby GT500. Yours is a brand new Mercedes SUV. Don't patronize me, Mr. Vance," she shrieked, lowering her voice conspiratorially for the 911 dispatcher. "He's trying to lie, saying it's a classic car or something. But I saw it. It's white. The shape is similar. It's expensive. He must have swapped the badges or repainted it in his nefarious garage workshop. Send the police immediately. I'm in fear for my safety and the safety of my property." I pinched the bridge of my nose. She wasn't just mistaken. She had genuinely managed to conflate the distinct sight of her new white SUV with my restored white muscle car, likely fueled by her pre-existing, intense animosity towards my hobby. The obsession had tipped into delusion. Within minutes, remarkably fast for Cypress Landing, the first patrol car arrived, lights flashing. The officer, a young man named Officer Miller, stepped out, assessing the bizarre scene. A furious, impeccably dressed woman pointing wildly at a suburban home, and a calmer but clearly exasperated man standing next to an enormous, partially open garage that held a pristine, unmistakable vintage car. Penelope immediately seized control. "Officer, thank God you're here. This man, Elias Vance, he's a known non-compliant resident, and he's a thief. He stole my new Mercedes. I saw him open the door, and there it was, the white one. He's clearly attempting to disguise it as some sort of old jalopy, or maybe he used the VIN from my old car on this one. Arrest him." Officer Miller, looking highly skeptical, first addressed me. "Sir, can you explain what's going on here?" "Officer, I'd be happy to," I said, pointing first to my car. "This is a 1968 Ford Shelby GT500. I have the title, the insurance, and the restoration receipts for every single part in that car, all registered in my name, and I've been driving it for 6 months. Now," I pointed to her vehicle parked haphazardly on the curb, "that is a brand new Mercedes GLE 450. They share only 2 characteristics. They are both white, and they both have 4 wheels. One is a vintage muscle car. The other is a modern luxury SUV." Officer Miller walked slowly to my garage opening. He peered at the Shelby. Then he walked to the Mercedes. He did this twice, his expression shifting from professional neutrality to thinly veiled amusement. "Ma'am," he finally said to Penelope, his voice quiet but firm, "are you claiming this Ford muscle car is, in fact, your Mercedes SUV?" "It's the same color," she insisted, her voice cracking with fury. "And he's not supposed to have a car like that. It violates the community rules. It must be stolen. No respectable person here owns a car like that." This statement was her undoing. The officer's demeanor hardened. He stepped back from the scene, pulled out his radio, and began confirming the VIN for my Shelby with the DMV. As he waited, I pulled out my phone and quickly found the official HOA Rulebook, which I had saved as a PDF after my lawyer had reviewed it. When Officer Miller returned, he was holding the confirmed clean title information. "Mr. Vance, your registration and title are clean. This vehicle is legally yours. No theft reported." He turned to Penelope. "Ma'am, there is no crime here. This is a civil dispute at best, and a baseless accusation at worst. But the rules, the fines, the property value." Penelope screamed, now openly weeping in frustration. This was my opening. I stepped forward, holding my phone, displaying the HOA documents. "Officer, since Mrs. Finch is insisting on involving the police in a civil matter, I'd like to point out her own violation of municipal code." I showed the officer the rule I knew she was breaking. She is the board president who enforces the no overnight street parking rule, yet her vehicle is currently parked illegally, blocking access to common drive space, and she abandoned it to make a false 911 report. Furthermore, Article 4, Section 12G of the HOA Rules states, and I quote, "Willful and malicious false reporting to emergency services, including police and fire departments, shall be grounds for immediate revocation of all board privileges and a $5,000 fine." Officer: She called 911 and claimed a felony was in progress over a car that has been legally garaged at my residence for a year. That is a malicious false report. The officer looked at the rule, then at Penelope, then at her illegally parked Mercedes. He sighed, pulling out a ticket book. "Ma'am, I am issuing you a citation for impeding traffic and illegal parking. And because you knowingly and falsely reported a violent felony to emergency services without cause, I am required to take a formal report of that action. This is now an official police record of a false emergency call. You are facing a significant fine from the city, and based on the language Mr. Vance has pointed out, you are also facing immediate penalties from your own homeowners association." Penelope Finch's face went white. Her perfectly coiffed hair seemed to deflate, and her expensive suit suddenly looked crumpled. The ultimate enforcer of the rules had just been trapped by her own pettiness, and the confrontation she engineered to publicly humiliate me had backfired, resulting in her being cited by the police in front of the neighbor she loathed, for an action specifically banned by the very authority she represented. The sight of her realizing the depth of her own folly was the most satisfying moment of the entire 2-year dispute. The fallout from Penelope's catastrophic 911 call was immediate, public, and devastating to her authority. The police report documenting the false and malicious report of grand theft auto over a classic car that looked nothing like her SUV was now public record. I took the police report, the accompanying parking citation, and the specific text of the HOA's false reporting rule directly to Mr. Davies, my HOA attorney. Mr. Davies acted swiftly. He submitted a formal complaint to the HOA's legal counsel, demanding Penelope's immediate removal from the board based on Article 4, Section 12G. He also included a request for a full refund of every fine I had ever paid related to my garage use, arguing that if her latest action proved her judgment was impaired and malicious, all her previous enforcement actions against me were equally capricious. The board, which had previously been complacent and cowed by Penelope, finally had a clear, objective reason to act. It wasn't about a subjective argument over mulch or hedge height. It was about police involvement and the very real liability of a $5,000 HOA fine that she, as the president, was now on the hook for. The board's legal team confirmed that the police report was irrefutable evidence of a malicious false report. The emergency board meeting held 3 days later was a complete rout. It was done via conference call, but the sound of her sputtering indignation was audible even on speakerphone. Penelope tried to argue that she was simply protecting the community's assets, and that the color similarity was reasonable cause. But no one was buying it. The threat of municipal fines and the embarrassment of having a police report on file detailing the absurdity of the theft claim was too much. In a unanimous vote, even her perpetually stressed husband, Gary, voted against her, muttering, "I just can't. Penelope, I can't." Penelope Finch was voted off the board and stripped of all voting and enforcement privileges. The $5,000 fine was immediately levied against her account, and the board attorney instructed her to pay the city parking ticket herself. The board, now terrified of future liability, immediately settled my case. I received a certified check for $250, the full amount of all garage-related fines I had paid. Furthermore, the discriminatory Article 4, Section 3.c, the project car visibility rule, was permanently struck from the Rulebook as unenforceable and arbitrary. My garage was now officially, legally, and without fear of reprisal, my domain. The impact on Penelope was immediate and public. She went from the most powerful woman in Cypress Landing to a pariah in less than a week. The gossip spread like wildfire. Not just that she was out, but why. She became known not as the president, but as the woman who thought a Ford was a Mercedes. She still lived 3 houses down, but her demeanor changed entirely. She stopped her aggressive patrols. She no longer made eye contact. Her new white Mercedes, the very car that had triggered her downfall, was now perpetually parked inside her closed garage, rarely seen again. The irony was sweet and complete. She, the high priestess of curb appeal, now hid her prized possession away from the public gaze, just as she had demanded I do. The long-term consequence for the neighborhood was an unexpected, but necessary, revitalization of community spirit. With Penelope gone, the board reformed, electing a neighbor who actually advocated for the residents, not just for power. The petty fines stopped. The atmosphere became noticeably lighter. People started leaving their garage doors open on weekends to chat. For me, Elias, the impact was profound. I realized that HOA rules are just rules, and they only have as much power as you allow them to hold. The takeaway is this: never let an HOA dispute about property become a matter of personal control. Know your rights, consult an attorney early, and be prepared to take the most absurd action to its logical, legal conclusion. Penelope's 911 call was her most absurd action, and it was the one that ultimately destroyed her reign. I finally finished Eleanor, and the first time I pulled her out onto the street, the new board president waved and gave me a thumbs up. The car was glorious, and now so was my freedom to enjoy it. I got my car, my money, and my sanity back, all because an HOA tyrant lost her mind over a white paint job. The complete dismantling of Penelope's authority had a ripple effect across Cypress Landing that was far more significant than simply settling my personal grievance. The community had been suffocating under her petty tyranny for years, and her public, self-inflicted embarrassment was the pressure release valve the residents desperately needed. Following Penelope's removal, the board's immediate actions were purely focused on damage control. They rescinded the ludicrous curb appeal enhancement fee and publicly apologized for the overzealous and unconstitutional enforcement actions of the previous administration. They didn't name Penelope, but everyone knew. They even instituted a new policy requiring 2/3 of the board to approve any fine exceeding $250, effectively ending the reign of unilateral, power-hungry decisions. For Gary, Penelope's long-suffering husband, the event provided an unexpected liberation. A week after the vote, he filed for a separation, citing irreconcilable differences and public humiliation. He moved in with his brother across town, leaving Penelope alone in the massive, silent house that had once been her fortress of power. I heard later through the neighborhood grapevine, now a less fearful and more openly chatty network, that Gary's divorce filing specifically mentioned the police report, the official documentation of his wife's delusion, as key evidence of her erratic behavior. It was the perfect symbolic ending to her reign. The same legal documentation she brought into my life to destroy me ended up destroying her own marriage. The property values, the supposed deity Penelope worshipped, actually thrived in the year after her departure, precisely because the neighborhood became known for its reasonable, resident-friendly governance instead of its ridiculous, viral-worthy fines. People were no longer scared to move into Cypress Landing, which had developed a reputation online as a hotbed of HOA horror stories. As for me, Elias, the experience fundamentally changed how I viewed my home and my rights. I continued to work on cars, now with my garage door open whenever I felt like it. I never abused the privilege. I simply enjoyed the freedom. The most meaningful impact was seeing the neighbors who had previously hidden from Penelope now openly embrace me. The family with the basketball hoop, the couple who had been cited for an unapproved rosebush color, and even a few of the elderly residents Penelope had charmed into voting for her. They all came over to introduce themselves, offer apologies for not speaking up sooner, and express gratitude. One afternoon, the new board president, Mark, came over. He didn't come to inspect or fine. He came to ask for advice on a classic motorcycle restoration he wanted to start. He looked at Eleanor, now gleaming in the sun, and simply shook his head. To think she called the police. I mean, they're not even the same kind of vehicle, Elias. That level of delusion is terrifying. We owe you a lot for fighting that fight. The enduring lesson, the final powerful takeaway, is about the nature of power within community organizations. Most people, when faced with petty bureaucracy, simply comply to avoid conflict. This compliance is the fuel that empowers people like Penelope. They rely on the sheer inconvenience of fighting them. My fight succeeded because Penelope, in her hubris, overreached so spectacularly that she transformed a civil dispute into a criminal one, creating a paper trail that even the most timid board members couldn't ignore. The police report was my ultimate weapon. It was objective, external validation that the conflict was not about my compliance, but about her mental stability and abuse of power. The story's true impact lies in the complete reversal of fate. The antagonist, who was obsessed with property conformity and public image, ended up with a police record for malicious behavior, a heavy fine from her own association, and a crumbling marriage, all because she couldn't stand the sight of a beautiful, non-standard car that wasn't hers. Every time I roll the Shelby out for a cruise now, I don't just see a perfectly restored piece of American history. I see a symbol of victory against petty, controlling bureaucracy. I open the garage door wide, let the engine rumble, and I feel zero guilt. My message to anyone dealing with an HOA bully is clear. Document everything, know your rules better than they do, and when they go low, be ready to call in the legal cavalry. If they overreach and make themselves look absurd, don't let the moment pass. Exploit the absurdity. Turn their paranoia into your peace. Because in the end, even a queen's reign ends when she gets caught making a false 911 call over a car that was never hers. My garage door remains open, a silent, beautiful monument to Penelope Finch's spectacular fall.